Welcome to Fork Around and Find Out, the podcast about building, running, and maintaining software and systems. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fork Around and Find Out. I am Justin Garrison, your host, and with me as always is Autumn Nash. How's it going, Autumn?
Struggling. Have you been sick more lately? Because I've never been sick this much in my entire life this year. I've been so sick.
Even working from home, it's the kids. It's the schools and the kids. It's just germ factories.
I don't even go outside, Justin.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe some grass would help.
Whose side are you on?
On today's show, we have Eve. Eve's a senior platform engineer, and I think some people might know her better as Help Me Exit VI on pretty much every social platform. Welcome to the show, Eve.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I follow you. I've been following you since the TikTok days. I haven't been on TikTok for a while, but when I found you on TikTok and then I found you again on Instagram, I think your skits are hilarious and topical for me, and I just love your insight. So I wanted to reach out and have you on the show.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Even
also,
everything
your
down
shirt
to the
is
user
really
handle.
rad. Your shirt is really rad too.
Oh, thanks.
And I know you talk a bit about Kubernetes, you talk a bit about cloud, you talk a bit about platform and CI. Can you give us a little background on what you've done in the past, like kind of how you came into tech and what you're doing?
Yeah. So how I came into tech, I had a whole career path before tech where I wanted to be a diplomat, and that I decided not to do that. My formal education is in mathematics, so I moved back to the States from living abroad for several years and tried to look into what can I do with a math degree that isn't becoming an actuary or an accountant. And I saw a YouTube video that was like using machine learning to estimate coffee prices in response to drought conditions in Brazil or something. And I was like, I want to do that. So I went like the data analysis, data science path, which got me more into data engineering at my first job, which was like a very small early startup. And then the person who had run our Kubernetes cluster and who had managed our deployments left, and I stepped into that role. And they were like, this is your job now. I started my TikTok. This is actually a fun fact, is that from my TikTok, I got my next job in tech, which was at the New York Times. I was there for 4.5 years, but it started with someone leaving a comment on one of my TikTok videos saying, I'm hiring DevOps engineers at the New York Times, add me on LinkedIn. And I was like, this is fake.
Yeah, spam.
And it wasn't.
Wow.
And then I worked on our CI/CD team. I was the technical lead and subject matter expert for CI. And then I was, toward the end of my tenure, the engineering lead for application delivery over the company. And then I left. And for the last 3 months, I've been a senior platform engineer at an AI health tech, later stage.
What made you want to start doing skits on TikTok and Instagram?
A desire for attention, and also just that there was a lot in tech that I found challenging, that I have always had the desire to laugh at things that I find challenging or find humor in them. So taking sort of frustrating experiences or having to learn all of the things all at once all the time and turning that into a skit. And then people liked it, so I kept making them.
That's the realest answer, though. People will be they'll come up with some answer that you're like, that sounds nice, but you know what I mean? That was a real answer. But also, I don't think you know how much I think that really helps when you're in tech, because things can be so frustrating, right? And a lot of times we're taught to pretend you know everything and fake it before you make it, and pretend you know all the things, and it's impossible to know all the things. So I think sometimes when you're having a really frustrating day, I was talking to a bunch of college students and I was like, it's mostly failure and then one good win and then failure and then a couple good wins, you know? And when you see someone else who's this process is horrible, or this is being able to relate, sometimes Justin will send me an Instagram meme and I'm like, you made my whole day, because I was so frustrated in that moment, you know? And you just feel so seen. So I think that's actually I think those do a lot more for people than people think it does, you know?
Yeah. My role puts me very close to production all the time. And so I feel like my life is just living on the highs of fixing a really cool bug and then the lows of causing a production incident just over and over. So you have to find humor in it.
The circle of life right there. How would you say, I mean, you're now like 5 or 6 years doing this from probably a pile of YAML that is now your responsibility to being able to kind of guide companies and plan things out and have a little more influence. How has things changed for you in those areas from when you first started, what the heck is Kubernetes, to now, platform engineer, like building and planning this stuff?
Yeah, I think the most recent sort of revelation that I had is that like really nothing is ever going to look like the textbook. I think for a long time I was like, this is what CI/CD should look like, and we should all be doing GitOps, and we should all be doing trunk-based development, and we should all be making really frequent tiny changes that just get released to prod. And then when I joined this company, one of the reasons they hired me was for my CI/CD expertise and sort of like standardizing their pipeline deployment workflow. And I came in and I was like, oh, we're not going to be able to get there without a bunch of steps in between. And sort of people talk about incremental change a lot in software development, but just acknowledging the incremental change of the like platonic ideal of a Kubernetes cluster and no configuration drift, and the actual system that I think, going back to not everyone can know everything. I think a lot of companies do ask application developers to also know a lot about infrastructure, a lot about Kubernetes, a lot about like their build, test, deploy pipelines. And I can't come in being like, well, why didn't you like architect this better? Because they architected it as best they could. And I'm also just architecting it as best I can. And I think now where I'm in a position where I'm making these decisions largely by myself, like I'm writing design docs and taking feedback and talking to folks, but I'm now the one sort of executing and moving and changing. And I'm like, man, I hope this doesn't blow up in my face in some way down the line.
I've been doing this long enough that I always expect it to blow up in my face. Right? Like that's kind of one of the, I guess my mindset changes over 25 years of doing this was it's all a matter of how big it's going to blow up in my face and at what timeline it's going to blow up in my face, right? Like at some point I know
this is going to sound bad though, but I think that sometimes because you're a dude, when it blows up in your face, it's okay. Oh yeah. But like when you're a girl, I do think that I have a lot of benefit of not being scared. They're just like, we knew you couldn't do it. You're just like, dude, like this is a normal hiccup.
100% true that yes, I have the benefit of the doubt, but also I try to give other people that same leniency and benefit of the doubt,
which is like, important because I think you do like that's like what the article you brought that a few months ago that said like the safety of your work environment and being able to like experiment and like fail, like I think that's
psychological
really
safety is the key indicator of high performance teams. Yeah, absolutely. And having that psychological safety of like this is gonna fail at some point, and also it's always easy to like dump on what someone else did from the past and say like, oh, why didn't you just design it better? Right? It's like, well, like how things get designed changes, tools change, people's knowledge changes over time. Like all of this stuff is growing and changing. And it's like, sometimes I look at the Git commit and I'm like, oh, that was me, right? Like I did do that, right?
Git blame gets real sometimes. Like, but I think what Eve was saying something like, I think the longer I've been in this industry, when I am interviewing with a team and you're kind of interviewing them back or kind of just talking to people at conferences, some of the stuff that Eve just mentioned is how I know that I want to work with someone when they talk about how they, like have done things wrong or how they've realized that you're coming into this new environment and you're trying to figure out why things are done this way and like how you're going to get it from point A to point B. And it's not going to be easy because when somebody comes in and they're like, it's going to be so easy, we're going to rewrite everything. I'm like, like, okay, you're one of those people. Like when people come in and they don't ask why something was built a certain way, or they just think they're going to like get a wand and magically make something completely different. And I'm just like, you didn't ask enough questions to be confident in that idea. You know what I mean? So I
everything
think that,
is easy
that
when you
shows
gloss
your
over the
expertise.
details.
Exactly. And then you just end up missing that important context of why those decisions were made or how you're going to get from point A to point B. And then just being like, let's switch it over. That's never going to go wrong. Totally.
Eve and I were talking in the pre-show. that like all the details, right? Like you're finding these obscure little bugs that are affecting you or your team in various ways that are buried in a GitHub comments or comment in a code or something. Like you have to find those things and know they exist.
It's like being a detective. That's what cracks me up. I was reading one of the books that your wife sent me. And like I was thinking about like being an engineer is kind of just being a detective. Like there's so much context that you have to get, and you have to know what context you need and how much to get into the weeds and how much not to. And it's like, I think that's the fun part for me. But I was thinking that's how you know Eve's good at her job, because she was like, how do I get from this to that? And we know that like once you start working with production and scale, that you're like, the textbook looks like a baby compared to what I just got thrown into. Like I remember when the first time I saw a Jenkins pipeline that looked so like ridiculous that it was like the class that I was taking, like just they were not the same beast, you know? And you're just like, now you really have to figure it out. So I think that's how you know that you're really good at your job, because you like walked into it and you were like, oh no.
I also, talking about obscure bugs, this was not an obscure bug, this was in the documentation and just missed it, is that with this new, so I've created a new sort of build once, deploy many style of deployment where you just promote artifacts to wherever you want them in Argo. Argo picks them up. And I had a team come back to me and they were like, well, how do we do a hotfix? And I was like, ooh, you don't do a hotfix. But I have to support hotfixes. So I was like, well, you check out like the last time, the commit of the last production artifact that you built, and then you make a PR on that, and then you take that build and you ship that. And then I caused a production incident telling teams to do that, because it turns out that when you use like the GitHub SHA in a GitHub action on a PR, it creates a merge commit with main and just merged whatever was in the tip of main with this PR. You have to use like the PR head SHA. And I was like, how was I supposed to know that? And then it was like literally in the documentation for GitHub actions.
But see, like oh. But be real, nobody reads all of the documentation. You have to be able to scan it and know what you need, and you might not have been looking for that thing. You know what I mean? But
yeah, I was going through it with a coworker, and he was sort of like, well, they don't say that in the documentation. Then he was like, well, they could have surfaced that better. I was like, thanks for supporting me.
That's a good coworker, okay? Like you need someone that you can cry with. That's your double eyes to look over your PRs and documentation and be like, me too, bro.
You know what I really love about that is I bet the person who wrote that line in the docs also had the outage. They're surfacing it exactly where they think it should be because they already broke it. And they're like, no one else will ever do this again because I wrote it down. And no, it's not how it works.
It's funny because I feel like people keep saying like, well, we don't need to build documentation anymore because it gets outdated. And I'm like I feel like we've got like lost the art of documentation. We just assume that like it'll be there or that like AI will write it later. And I'm just like, I think that we forget how important those things are. Like the amount of times I've heard that like with people building things in production, I'm just like you still need to write things down. Like I write things down for myself. I will write the code and then forget about it later. So I'm just like,
Eve, I'm curious your opinion on the current state of infrastructure deployment and sort of, especially how it relates in Kubernetes is kind of this weird way of doing things. But how do you feel the differences are between something that would be traditionally we call CI/CD, something we call GitOps, and something we call platform engineering? Where do you draw the line between those things? And how do you have a definition or a way
based
that
off of that face you were making? Like it just...
So, man, I think it's hard or harder to do kind of like platform engineering in a GitOpsy way, where at least when I think of GitOps, I'm thinking specifically of something like Argo CD, like watching and reconciling with whatever the state in Git is. And when I think about like Terraform, I'm a lot less like, you're not really watching something. You're probably triggering with a merge or with a promotion of some kind. But I would say that, this is a very hard question for me.
Where he knew
like I'm really curious in your opinion on it because you're in the trenches doing it, and like I come at it mostly from a like an academic definition side of things, where like the open GitOps has a open, I think it's like opengitops.dev or whatever. Like they have a definition of like what is GitOps, of how it was defined, how Weaveworks and Alexis like defined it back in the day when they coined the term, and it was different than CI/CD.
GitOps and DevOps.
What was that?
What's the difference between GitOps and DevOps?
I
Oh my
actually gave a keynote several years ago at GitOps Con that was called "The Difference Between DevOps and GitOps" is writing it down, but it was a play on Mythbusters. The difference between like science and screwing around is writing it down.
Just write it down. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I came to
It was
the
just
perfect
us,
place
like-
to ask this question.
Yeah, it was just us taking Mythbusters gifs and putting like text behind them and being like, use
Those
the
are
main
the best
branch.
talks, though, because it relates something like.
No, go
I
ahead.
just think those are the best talks because it relates something interesting to like what you're trying to teach.
So going back to the question, I would say that like platform engineering is the foundational building blocks that then allows app developers to do CI/CD. Because I think CI/CD relies on infrastructure being as close as possible to each other across environments. So you do want something that reconciles, like Terraform that watches state, so that if I go in and I create, a new ECR repo or I change some settings on something, I don't know. I can't think of examples off the top of my head, but I go in, I change an auto scaling group in AWS, that gets overwritten. So I'm not expecting that in staging just because I've like manually changed it in dev. And then the next time I sort of say like Terraform, make everything nice again and make it as close as possible to all of these environments so then I can have a more predictable application deployment experience. I think that really used to bite people when there have been a bunch of manual changes that weren't documented anywhere, or that were a part of like testing or debugging and then forgotten about and not updated, that make it like really hard to do application deployment well. And I guess like infrastructure can also, I think, reach into like monitoring. But I think of it mostly as sort of like the building blocks of getting, Argo set up, Argo like app of apps or project of projects, and that sort of configuration, your Terraform, your basics there that you can then sort of CI/CD application code on top of.
That's really interesting, your distinction here, which if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, like the platform engineering piece is like what the application developers are interfacing with. Behind that is usually something like an Argo, which has a closer reconciliation loop to what they're doing, right? It's closer to the applications, it's doing the application deployment. But then the CI/CD, the Terraform piece, is underlying the foundation for the Argo. And so it's like you have these layers of the further away from the developer you go, the less frequently you have to change it necessarily. And the more, I don't want to say stable, but you don't necessarily need Terraform in a for loop, right? Terraform can be, we only change this when we update ECR. We don't need this reconciled every minute, right? But the application and the Argo, the containers, however you're defining that in Kubernetes, that is, hey, we don't want to waste the dev's time. So we need to make sure that they also get that loop to get it faster. And that is where webhooks and constant pulls come into play.
Yeah, I think platform engineering and platform has really today, I think when people think of platform engineering, they think a lot of like an internal developer platform. So like a developer comes to the platform team or a UI and they say, I want to make a new app. And the platform team is sort of like, here you go. And it's all like nice and packaged. And it's like, you don't have to worry about like setting up a namespace or setting up like, you just have to worry about like your application code. And then we'll integrate it with the cloud or with Kubernetes or set up all your Terraform.
Hopefully it's documented too. Like that's always like every platform. Like one of the best things I did at one of my previous jobs was I said, okay, here's an example application. I wrote the app, you deploy it on our stack. And I gave everyone 3 days. I was like, you have to deploy it, the entire thing. And like, it was a platform team. We had 3 groups and we said, okay, I did the infrastructure. We had a deployment team. We had a monitoring, a CI team. And we're like, everyone knows their piece really well, but no one knew everyone else's and we didn't document it enough. And so as I was like, here's the app, you figure out how to containerize it, you deploy it. And not a single person out of all 12 people managed to do it in time. And I was just like, that's eye-opening because we assume our developers are figuring out and we don't even know how the whole thing goes together to deploy it in that amount of time. And all back to documentation, right? Like you should be writing those docs to give people, like you can give them a package that says, here, this should be easy, but everyone has something they need special or different, or some configuration they don't know where it exists.
Yeah, I think an issue that I ran into at my new company is that there wasn't a really good way to do rollbacks. And so a lot of teams were doing rollbacks of their like Kubernetes replica sets via the Argo UI. But then because it's Argo, it would just redeploy whatever was in Git. And it would be like, haha. And I'm like, why is that even there in Argo? But so teams were then like turning off autosync, but then they'd forget that they turned off autosync and they'd be like, hey, we made changes, but those changes aren't showing up in Argo. And I'm just like, oh man, you really, when you're working in a platform team, when you're trying to focus on developer experience, you have to make the correct thing the easiest thing to do. I think that's really important that I could write like a super complicated like CI/CD process for deployment and rollback that's like beautiful, and that I could be like, this is a textbook and I'm going to take this to conferences, and no one would use it. They'd all be like, we hate this. We're doing the old thing. We'd rather face the Argo autosync issue. So you just have to make it, whatever it is, it has to be easy to understand and easy to do. Or else developers aren't going to do it. And I don't blame them for that. I also try to do the easiest thing possible at all times.
How much do you think that comes down to just what's the default? Right? Like that, like the default setting for a thing. I always heard the phrase, the tyranny of the defaults, right? Whatever is the default saying is what is put on people, whether good or bad. And if the default is don't have sync, no one's going to have sync, right? Even if it's the best way you should use it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think there are things that I've seen like across my career that I sort of come in and I'm like, well, if you want to do it this way, like why are we using Argo? Like if you don't care about syncing, like let's just deploy to a Kubernetes cluster and we can push new Kubernetes manifests, and like you're going to have the same result, except you're not going to have like a little Argo UI with all of your objects. But like, why use Argo? Or I've worked with teams who had like a Canary rollout, but there was no kind of like testing on that. So they just had a rollout over like say 3 minutes. And they were like, well, whenever we have to do a rollback or a roll forward, then we have to go through this rollout again. And it really slows us down. And I was like, why do you have this rollout? Like it's not doing anything functionally worthwhile that you get with a Canary, where you're like testing some of the traffic and making sure there aren't issues and then like rolling back. I'm like, if it's just like 3 minutes to have some gates on your replica set as it rolls out, like Kubernetes does that, or like Argo does that automatically with a new, like it makes sure the new one can come up before it brings the old one down. So why do you want Canary? And they're like, oh, well, like Canary is the best practice, the like fancy thing to do. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not like, it's
Someone
not
read a
doing
blog
anything
post
for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think people
why do
get
we
so
have
in
this
love.
is definitely like a staff level question. That's like, like, hey, why does this exist? And no one answers it. Like, yeah, you just got a promotion right there.
I think that sometimes people get so in love with either the academic version of something or like this is how we should do it the fancy way, that they don't even ask the questions like that, or just in general. Like sometimes people will make this really complicated version of how to solve something, and you're like, you could have done that with a cron job and some like glue and called it a day.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Kubernetes in general, right? Like that's that people deploy Kubernetes just because it was the guide, right? They read a guide, a blog post, whatever, and they're like, oh, this said do on Kubernetes. I'm like, it's a WordPress blog. Like just, you can put that on a VM. Like it's okay.
sometimes I almost think that that's why I enjoyed platform and release engineering more than just software engineering, because platform and release engineering is like, how do we get this done? And it needs to work. And sometimes like working with just software engineering is like really theoretical, and you go in circles for so long that I'm just like, can we just build something that works?
Yeah. The bridge between code and software is super fascinating. Of like when someone wrote something and then it reaches a customer is a very complicated mess.
And then sometimes software engineering can be so disconjoined from actual customers after being a solutions architect or a PM, so it's like, you just see how like sometimes these jobs and these titles make you so siloed, and it's so different how you interact with code and the actual shipped product, What do you like, I guess, what do you think now? I mean, you're obviously been more in infrastructure and, you're very successful at that, but how do you see like I guess, the industry different from going from like more of like mathematics and data science to like infrastructure? Like, is there anything that you weren't expecting or anything that you end up liking more now that you're working with more platform and not so much like data and numbers?
I don't think so. I think what something from when I got my mathematics degree is that I had to do some computer science courses and I absolutely hated them. And I was like, I never want to code ever. I think because mathematics, it's very clear how to get from point A to point B, which is you have your axioms and your laws and your theorems, and then your like proofs. And I think coding, I went into a coding class and we were trying to like solve like trinomials or something. And I was like, I don't know where to start. And my professor in office hours was just like, just start somewhere. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, what do you mean just start somewhere? And I do feel like platform engineering has more of that structure still that's like closer to mathematics than traditional like backend development where you're just kind of like, how am I going to do this? And there are algorithms and data structures available, but you just kind of like decide what you want and start going for it. I do think that platform engineering has a little more of that like lawful structure that I liked from mathematics, but I'm not sure there's anything that has been surprising to me. Maybe I was studying for some like data structure and algorithms questions, like when I was interviewing for a new position, and I did have a moment where I was like, oh man, algorithms are just math. I was like, I never thought of that before. This is just graph theory. That might be the only sort of like wow moment of something that like probably should have been obvious to me, but had a different name. So I figured they weren't the same.
Different domains, different names, different terms for the same sort of thing, right? Like the implementation might be slightly different, but yeah, it's just the same thing that you were already learning. You write it down to tell the computer how to do it.
I would say that I learned math backwards.
Yeah.
Because I was like, math seems scary. I always thought math seemed scary until you like actually like I learned it backwards from learning computer like engineering concepts, and then I was like, oh, this is just like rules and structure.
It's funny you mentioned the computer science class too, because I was at university and the only class I ever dropped was a systems engineering class because I literally had no idea what they were talking about. It was specifically Unix. Like they were teaching Unix in the early 2000s, and I went for 2 weeks and I was like, I haven't understood a single word this professor said. Like I have to drop this class. And it was just so foreign to me because at the time I didn't even have a computer. Like I had no computer of my own. I was never into programming. I didn't know any of this stuff. And I was like, I don't know what they're saying. And so I just have to get out of this class and maybe I'll learn it later. But then coming at it from a different angle of a very practical standpoint of like, I need to get my Wi-Fi drivers working on Linux and I have no internet access right now. Right? Like back in the day, like that was the only way I could get online. No smartphone to look things up. And I'm like, I have to figure this out from man pages. Is a different type of systems engineering that was more practical. And because I could start somewhere, it made it much more approachable for me to say, oh, I know how to do this side of it.
Yeah, I dropped I didn't drop, but I hated my first computer science class because it was like web design and it was Dreamweaver and I absolutely hated it.
I think so like when you get a math degree at some point, if you're doing applied math, I guess not, but my degree was like much more theoretical. And I remember it must have been number theory where we learned about like prime number encryption. And I was just like, when am I ever going to need this? And then I was like, oh.
Awesome. Are there any things that you see people do that are considered best practices that you're like, that's just dumb? Like, don't do that. Like you mentioned promoting artifacts, like from one environment to another. And I've always known that as a like, oh yeah, you don't have to rebuild because the artifact's the same. You should change the SHA in your manifest or something and like promote it that way or re-tag it. And I've always kind of felt like that was a weird anti-pattern where it's like, no, like I'm going to rebuild because it's going to go to a different repo. Like I'm going to put it in a different ECR or something. I don't want production pulling directly from the dev environment's container registry because I'm going to break something there. So I have to separate these things anyway. So I'm not promoting the artifact. I'm actually rebuilding in a new environment. And I hope that it's reproducible, but in many cases, containers aren't reproducible, right? Like you're going to get a different update for some library or something. So it's like, it's not the same thing. Ideally it would be, but I often see that it's more work to try to do real artifact promotion than it is to just like, we're just gonna let CI go and hope and pray that this is close enough when we roll it out.
Yeah, I think it's really common to build at each environment. And I think one of the reasons that the build one, deploy many best practice is a best practice is one, you're deploying the exact same thing that you tested. So you tested it on dev, you put it on staging, it's the same thing. You test it on staging, you put it on prod, it's the same thing. So you're not getting, causing like flipping zeros and ones somewhere every 10th artifact or something. So it's very slightly different. But I think also it saves time. One of the things that I hear the most from teams is that their like CI pipelines are too slow. And they're like, it takes way too long to like run all our tests. And I'm like, well, on the one hand, like I have literally worked with a team who like part of their CI tests was they like opened an SFTP server and like transferred like all these files in SFTP, and I'm like, yeah. And they're like, no, we're gonna leave that in. And I'm like, okay. But I do think that builds take a really long time. And I think I've recently run into this where I had never really spent too much time looking closely at how teams write their Docker files. But I think what I have found since I started doing that is that many Docker files are basically like one layer. And then they're like, well, maybe we can cache so it will be faster. And I'm like, it's not going to cache anything if it's one layer. The whole, like the cache takes the layers that aren't changed. And then all the layers that you build on top of that, like it rebuilds those. That's the point. And so caching isn't going to change anything. But so I think the two, it's more standard to build and write your code in a way where you're not like hard coding any environment configuration into the container, into the built like artifact, so it can go through. But I would say mostly for consistency, and then secondly for time, it can be more complex to sort of get it, either move the image from your dev ECR to your stage ECR to your prod ECR, or have like a central ECR that all environments can reach out to and grab. I don't have a strong opinion about retagging. I know some people who focus, a lot of my colleagues who I've worked with who are like SRE specialists are like, oh, we hate retagging because then it like messes up the metrics and the like tracing. I don't really care personally. I'm not an SRE. Once go somewhere else for your uptime. But I think for me, it's mostly the consistency and the time saved that now like that artifact is built. And also I think if you aren't doing really frequent deploys, it is difficult to get back the state. You would have to, I guess, like check out the commit that you wanted to promote and then rebuild from that, rather than just like have that artifact built at the time that commit was made and then it's just there. And so even if you're making tons of changes on main, that's not blocking you from taking this artifact that was built in the past and moving it through to production, which is another issue that I've seen frequently is teams, they're like, oh, we're going to do a release tonight. No one merge anything so that our code base is where we want it to be. And then someone doesn't see Slack and they merge something in and they're like, oh God, now we have to run all the tests again. Now we have to like revert this. Like, it's like so much more complicated than just like, we built this artifact at this time and now it's just there forever.
Or you forget a commit that you had to put a patch on top of something and you're like, throw it all away after a 12-hour build.
Yeah. Yeah, that one cherry pick that you're like, oh, I don't think it's making it in. I'm not doing this
like,
again.
We didn't take the patch we needed. No. I remember Java 8 used to take like 3 days to build. Like, you can't mess that up because like then you're like missing your SLA for sure.
A lot of my content and skits where I talk about CI, I feel like I bring in like, is your CI like opening an SSH server and SFTPing the entire internet? And I just feel like I bring that back like over and over again because I just remember this one team that I was like, why are you doing this? Which is only seconded by a team that would stand up an entire Postgres server and like test all of their migration changes against this like ephemeral Postgres server in CI and then break it all down. And they were like, we need our builds to finish in under 2 minutes. And I was like, you need to stop doing that.
Well, yeah,
and they were like, we can't stop doing that. And I was like, okay.
I feel like when you like being a solutions architect is very much learning like the best practices, and then going from that to like being an engineer in production. And I was like, oh, none of this is best practice. They're like, you can't do that or you'll break everything. And you're like,
Yeah, I will give you
okay.
the diagram in the AWS blog posts that does not look like anything in reality.
Oh
Yeah,
my
for
God.
sure.
Like, I remember, like, I got on one team and they were a data team, and they were like, everything is like never ever like test in production with like huge tables of data. And they're like, we're just gonna drop this table really quick. And I'm like, what do you mean? Or they're like, we just made a test and we just copied a whole Redshift table over it. I'm like, do you know how much Redshift costs? What do you mean? Like, I've spent like the first 6 months of that job just horrified the whole time. It's like, you can do this.
I think I got to a point where, again, my job puts me very close to production, and where I'm often like teams who are having issue with CI or need to do a quick deployment or rollback, like will often like pull me into incidents. And there was a point when I was like so comfortable with working on production that I would just sort of like get on production and look around. And one day my manager sent me a Slack about some changes that I was making in dev, like that I was doing the proper way. And she was just like, I just want to make sure you're like, are you doing this on production right now? And I was like, oh, I need to take a step back from how frequently I'm on production if people are actively like, you're doing this the right way, right? Like,
I feel like it's like the videos or skits that you make that I'm imagining, like I haven't seen all of them, but like sometimes I feel like that's like engineer therapy, right? Like when someone else has the same like problem or they've seen something absolutely ridiculous, like after you have like a bad day or like you have like something go on and then you see it and you're like, oh my God, someone else goes through the same problem. Like it makes you feel so much better.
I completely agree. And I feel like we're talking about the difference between DevOps and GitOps, right? Like DevOps was all about making that blameless, right? Like DevOps was always about the culture. It was always about the people make mistakes, but we're trying our best sort of thing. And I honestly feel like GitOps has, not GitOps specifically, but just the era of GitOps has moved us away from caring about the people and the culture and more about just the tools and execution of things. And even myself as a very privileged white dude in tech, me bringing down something in 2026 is a lot different than me bringing down something in 2014. And just the way that that's handled. And unless I blame it on AI is like the only way I can escape out of this today of like, oh, well, like I told Claude to do it and like, whoops, like it did something wrong. Like that's the only thing that I can think is like, this is okay still. Is that a problem for juniors and people getting in the industry and people that are making their first production? Whoops. Like that is a rite of passage for a lot of people, and knowing that other people do it is reassuring that you can get better and you can still learn from it and you can still be involved in this community and still provide value even if you've taken down production.
yeah, I think it's something that more senior engineers need to do more explicitly now that like there are fewer, or with GitOps, I guess ostensibly there are fewer production outages that are happening because you're like, oops, I went and changed this and didn't write down that I changed it. I think a blameless culture is still really important. That's something that I screen for when I'm interviewing, is I talk about, like how often are people causing incidents? Like, what does the incident response look like? What do your retrospectives look like? And I think it truly is just like an exposure therapy experience of causing an issue and hopefully being in a job with mentors around who are like, oh yeah, I took down prod in the past too. That's okay. And not, whenever a skit that has something to do with taking down prod or an outage that happened, inevitably there are comments being like, oh, someone got fired today. And I think really at the majority of companies, that's not the case unless like it's some like gross negligence thing, or you purposely went in and you were like, I'm going to delete our Kubernetes production cluster. Then I think you might get fired. But I think with GitOps, it's much more, there needs to be a greater sort of explicit effort in telling juniors like, hey, it's okay, this happens all the time. And even I just caused this slight incident related to the merge commits that were happening in CI that I wasn't expecting. And I sent a colleague a message on Slack, and I was like, this is my fault. And he just sent me back like blameless with a smiley face. And I was like, yeah, but it's my fault. Like it is. And also I can understand that like it's a human thing that happens, and especially happens in software development. But I think it's really, really important to try to keep the culture of like the truly blameless retrospective where you're just, yeah.
One of the things about like the DevOps era of operations was that someone pushing the key that took down production often would turn around to say, actually, we're all to blame, because again, the tyranny of the defaults, the easy thing to do should be the right thing, but also this thing should be protected, right? Like
there should never be a button that can take down production.
Right, like those sorts of things. Like I've told the story before, but when I took down Disney Animation because I told every server that we had to go update Google Chrome, like that should be a thing that wasn't possible. I did hit the key. It was my fault, but also it was at a time when we said, actually, like we should maybe put some more safeguards around that. So, like maybe we shouldn't have thousands of connections go out to Google at once. We should be able to block some of that, or at least verify, like, are you really sure about this? Those are things that have gone away. And at least I don't see them anymore. I don't see people publicly talking about it.
Though. Like, I think because if you think about it, like, so I think you can't ignore the fact that we've all been through layoffs. We've all been through, like the job market's tight, right? So like there's so much more pressure. And then when you add on the fact that every company is like, use as much AI as you can, and then use this, and just you need to be as productive as possible, and turn out like the deadlines are tighter. People are working with much less. There hasn't been headcount in 4 years for anything. You know what I mean? So we're all learning to use AI. We're learning to do it with less. And I think it's also like, how long can that be sustainable? Like when we were doing it in the first 6 months or the first year, it was like, okay, hopefully it won't be this way forever. But now we're like 4 years into like doing as much as we can with no headcount and surviving, you know what I mean, on vibes and coffee or whatever. So like, I think when you add all those different factors of like, you're pushing teams to like the brink, you're incorporating AI, you're changing these processes, they're doing like, you want them to be 10 times more productive, and then there is like no blamelessness. So like, you know what I mean, like it just seems like we're just going to like compound the amount of mistakes that could have been learned from, but instead they're going to be either hidden or pushed, like, or not talked about, or people are going to instead have to fear getting in trouble. Like we get back to like the safety for like in the workplace, you know what I mean, like the mental safety, like in safe environment. So I think those things are not just not happening, being blameless, but they're almost compounded. And I think we're going to see what happens in the fallout from that.
Every time the industry goes through a shift and people are relearning and retooling, there's always learning pains, outages, things that we make assumptions about how they worked before. This happened when we started moving to automation for config management. It happened when we were starting to move to cloud, moving to containerization. AI is not different. AI is going to be the exact same thing.
I think it's different though, because before we've invested billions of dollars into saying that this fixes all your problems, it does it for you, and we can get rid of humans. Right? So this product, people are more interested in this product being perfect than we are into like giving developers grace, because right now developers are expendable, right? So they're already like, we don't need you. We can fire you and use this thing for you. So I think like when we went into it with automation or Kubernetes or whatever, the like CI/CD, it was like, hey, we're going to try this new thing. And it might not work, or we might go through some bumps, but like we were understood where we were, right? This new thing, people are more interested in it being perfect and it solving the world's problems than admitting it's a tool. Whether you like the tool, love the tool, hate the tool, it's a tool, right? And and using at this scale for this like increased productivity, if it was 100% perfect, it would be like a learning curve, right? So the fact that we're like taking it, and like you have to admit, like at this point, it doesn't matter what company it is, they are more interested in you using it and pretending like it's going to solve all the problems than the actual like grace and like how we're going to figure this out and how do we recommend it being using, which is one thing I give Oxide. Their paper on how to use and how they're going to incorporate it into their work and how they're going to help their developers use it, top tier. I think Oxide is going to continue to push the industry in the right direction. And that's why their company is so successful, because like that seems like just a intelligent, logical thing to do. And I think people are too busy just ignoring the fact that we have to learn how to work with AI and change like the way that we're being productive and kind of come up with a new process. And just saying it's the magic box and it's like this elephant in the room, that I think we could grow so much by just figuring out like, hey, how do we use this in production? How do we like actually teach people how to use it? But nobody's talking about it. It's like the elephant in the room. Just use it and shut up, and it's your fault if it breaks.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Like I was the shift has been the same where people are involved, but the pressure of it today is way
It's
worse.
wild.
And there was a little bit of that, I think, when we moved to cloud, because that was on people's credit cards. And we're like, oh,
Yeah.
your Lambda function ran wild and now my credit card got maxed out. Like that was an outage that would happen that caused problems for people that was more serious than like, oh, a server crashed, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
like, no, I have to pay this bill now.
But that's more of being accountable financially, right? Like it's being accountable, but it's still like, you know, shit happens.
And the AI's propping up the United States economy right now.
That's what I'm saying. Nobody's going to be like, this is going to be like a, you know, a trial and error. People are just like, it's magic and you must use it, like, you know. But I also think like anything is going to take time to make it a process. And nobody's like, we've talked about how execs love it. We've talked about how it vibe codes some cool stuff. But nobody's talked about how you get from there to production. Nobody. It's the elephant in the room. We're not talking about how to train juniors to use it, how to make sure you're learning it, it's not making you just dumb. Like, it could actually probably be more profitable if we would figure out how to get from point A to point B. Like, it's not even like shade. It would figure out how to actually make it a thing.
Eve, do you
I
see a
don't
role
know.
there? Do you see a role for AI in this, in CI/CD and platform space?
Yes. I mean, I think like many engineers, do view AI as a tool. Executives, like notwithstanding, being like, this is productivity magic and will replace people, and like the doom and gloom of late stage capitalism come to fruition. I view it as a tool. When I spoke at KubeCon EU several years ago about OPA and ConfTest, and ChatGPT was out and was terrible. And I remember like being like, write me a Rego policy, and it gave me all this stuff that like isn't valid code. And I was like, ha 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 ha. And I think now with, I mean, who knows where AI will be in May when this comes out, but I think now it's like Opus 4.6 just came out. I found real value with that tool, but I do think that the downside, we're not really united in as a career, or even at a company level. It's very hard to unite in how people are using AI. I think because there are like people who really hate AI and are like, I'll never use AI, and then people who are like, I really love AI, they're like, well, I'm just gonna stay quiet. Or the people who really hate AI are like, well, I'm just gonna stay quiet. And so we're like, not, yeah, it's definitely an elephant in the room. I think another issue is just that like AI is so verbose. And so then people are opening these PRs with, you know, again, it's the early startup nightmare of like the one engineer who in the middle of the night changes 400 files and writes like 10,000 lines of code. And it's just like, please like look good to me, like thumbs up, approve.
Yeah.
I think AI is really similar. I don't know the answer or the solution or even how to start to get there. Probably like speak about it more openly, I think, and as employees in tech, like you know, I was
also
part
think
of,
it's like,
oh, go ahead.
Like what you just said is speaking about it openly. Like, isn't it wild? Like we in this podcast, we've talked about GitOps, DevOps, SRE, like all of these things. There's been some sort of process, whether it's a right process, the wrong process. They've argued the process to death. But like in the normal developer way, no one is arguing the process in which to use AI in production. And we would get value from that because that's how our industry works. We come up with a process, somebody else like rips your process apart, and then they name it 5 different things, even though you're doing the same process and you fight it out somewhere. You know what I mean? Like nobody's doing that. Why are we not doing that with this thing that's supposed to change everything? Instead of deciding if we're going to use it or not use it, or you hate it or whatever, kick the tires and figure out how we can use it in a safe way that we can teach junior engineers, we can make it secure.
I will say the way I've been using it is it's improved my POCs dramatically, where historically I wrote almost every POC I ever did in Bash. Like the first time I wrote something, it was just in Bash
You
because I
kill
was
me with
familiar
you in
with it.
Bash. I can't deal with you. Like you just like you are like I'm gonna pick the one thing that everybody hates and I'm gonna use
It was the one
all the time.
commonality that like I knew how to write it, and like, but I was like full on like websites and APIs in Bash. Like I was just like, you know what, like I don't, until I got to a certain point, like I would move
You
over
were
to
like
Python.
those JavaScript people who are obsessed with JavaScript, but with Bash, it's just
Yeah,
wild.
I could do it. I could do it Bash, but like I've been able to do so much more, not because of my limitations, but because I know roughly how the thing should look, and be able to fill in the details. Like I wrote a mobile app, like I vibe coded a mobile app as a POC.
In Bash?
No, not in Bash. With AI. With
He would try it though, Eve. Like he if anybody would try it, he would try it. It would be like JavaScript with a back end of Bash.
Yeah, but like I vibe coded a mobile app to like see if the POC would work, so that I could show the process and the value to get budget to pay a person. Right? Like that was my thought process in use case here was I want something to exist. I need to show why and how it might work. And I need to at least prove it out, but beyond just a description, right? Like here's a paper of like how this thing should work. Like, no, I'm going to show you a video of what I think should be possible in this thing. And I will show 10% of it, right? Like maybe not everything works, but we get there, right? And it took me about a day and a half to vibe code it. It cost me $40 in Claude Code of like, okay, this is enough sessions that there we go. Let's put this out there, record a video. And now I can go through the process of, hey, here's the thing that I want to exist. I found a consultancy or a freelancer or hire on a full dev if we think it's valuable enough. Here's the budget we want to set aside for it. We want to prove this out as something that we can support and make it possible. And granted, they can use AI in it as well. Like, right, they're going to use some of that, but they're going to have much more knowledge in how it should be set up and how it can be maintained than me just like, let's see if this one works and get it work enough to deploy to my phone.
But don't you think that in itself is a better value prop than we can fire everybody and then like we'll just vibe code everything and it'll be great? Like you still saved money by like making this thing more robust but like faster. You proved it that it would be something that's productive and worth spending the money on. Why is that never the value prop when we like are selling these things? And for me,
I think because
like,
the promise is bigger, right? Because the promise is in a year I don't need to hire someone. Right. And when we're on Opus 10, then it's like, okay, give me the full app.
I've tried to like debug a 4,000 line, like it's rough. Like I think Claude's a game changer, but it's rough. Like
yeah.
But to me, like I can go and start a proof of concept 3 different ways, figure out why one way is the best way, and then it helps me to get started when I'm like deer in the headlights, overwhelmed with something. You know? And helps you break down and plan and go in really in depth and then go pull me sources, then I can go read those sources. Like, it makes you so much more efficient, and it's really helped me not to be stuck as much, you know?
I think there's a really good space for AI in incident response of looking over all the logs everywhere forever and being like, this might point you toward more toward a solution. I think that would be a good application of it. That I'm sure someone is, I'm sure there's some
really
startup somewhere. Yeah. It's really good at logs.
Well, think about it, but the human eye, right? Like our eyes get tired watching line to line to line. You're more likely to miss something. So if you can get something to at least like narrow it down a little bit, then you can go in there and like, it's like the perfect use case, really. Like it's one of the really good use cases.
Well, I just posted on Blue Sky like the other day of like, we spent trillions of dollars to make computers read their own error messages. Right? Like that is the whole point of just like,
you're not wrong.
I have used AI a lot and found a lot of value in it actually for soft skills, for like forming messages or copy pasting some Slack messages and being like, is this person being like rude to me or am I just reading into that? And then also being like, here's my response. Can you make it like not rude or mean or like, I hate this person. And then Claude's like, you should hate this person. And I'm like, thanks, Claude.
Let me tell you, Claude will make you feel better about some things. Like
you're absolutely right.
Uses it to like reply to like her ex-husband, and I'm just like.
One time I used it when my partner and I had a fight, and I was just like, he doesn't understand. And Claude was like, well, look at this from his perspective, and I was like, thanks, therapist Claude.
I'm just like,
but it did help.
I went from like, how do people like use AI as a therapist to like. Okay, I see how you went down the wrong road. Maybe I'm not gonna go through it, but like it's good for taking the emotion out of it and then listing some logic for you. Like, it's not bad. It's also a good hype, man. Probably too good for a few people, but like.
Yeah, a little, you have to be careful that you're not, there are real dangers there.
I think we're going to be okay, but some of those red pill podcasters, I'm like, I can see how this would be really bad for you.
Yeah, as a woman in tech, I'm using it for the confidence boost of like, you're not an imposter, and they're using it.
Exactly. We're like, no, you don't have that problem. Please stop. It was so real. I felt it in my soul.
We're right about time. Eve, I'm curious, is there any advice you would give to someone coming into whatever we want to call it, platform engineering, CI/CD, DevOps, whatever we want to call this space, of something that they should or shouldn't be doing, something they should try to look at, or even just how to like get started and have some more, I don't say authority, but some better designs on the real world's implications of how we ship code to customers?
Ooh, I would say there are a couple things. One is, and maybe this isn't universal, but it's absolutely true for me, is like, just go do something. As much as I disliked my computer science class where my professor was like, just go do something, just go do something. Just go like write a Kubernetes namespace spec and then a pod spec and use like Kubernetes on Docker desktop to like play. I have always learned best by like doing and actually like using my hands to type and make something. I'd say the second thing is, if you are lucky enough to have someone in your life who is, a senior engineer, or you're a junior at a company, or you have friends who graduated a couple of years before you and are now working, is to get comfortable saying that you don't know and like asking for help. I think I was very lucky in my first job that I had an incredible mentor who was like, don't stay stuck for too long. Like, don't stay stuck for like more than half an hour before sending me a Teams message and being like, I don't know what's happening. I think it's really valuable to get comfortable with the feeling of like not knowing. And then from admitting, even if you're just admitting to yourself, like, I don't know, you can take it to Claude and like no one will ever have to know. If you're like me and like I'm a very introverted person who's like,
I totally do
that too.
It might not know the answer, but it gets you unstuck though.
Yeah, but just get comfortable with not knowing, or get comfortable with discomfort, because I feel like there is a lot of that in tech, which is constantly changing and you're constantly learning new things.
Shout out to mentors like that, because they are like the make it break it, I think especially in women's careers, because it's so much harder to be able to like come from that place of imposter syndrome, and people kind of already assume that you don't know what you're talking about. So like I think those mentors are just really, really important. What was your handle again, and how did you come up with it?
Help me exit VI. And again, like I came up through, I was not like a dev. I was doing data analysis. And so the first time that I had to commit something to Git, I was like, how do I get out of this? Like, where am I? Help me. And I think it's a joke that everyone understands.
I think one of my most popular videos on YouTube is 10 ways to exit VI, which just because it shows up in Google searches. It's just like, yeah, no, here's 10 ways you can get out of it.
Did you really find 10 whole ways?
Yeah. Oh, there's more than that. Actually, people left comments, so it was just like, I had no idea.
I did one time. I was trying to show my partner how difficult it is to exit. And he's a data scientist. And I was like, try to exit this. And he just like closed the terminal. And I had a tab, like a different tab that I was actually doing something on. And I was like, oh, the joke is on me.
That's my fault.
Oh no. When the joke goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like so relatable, but also like, do you just wonder, like, is it some mean gotcha that they don't teach you Git or like VI in like school? Like, are they trying to hurt people's feelings? Like, or is that just to make sure the rate of dropout is like not increasing? Like,
it's the gatekeeper.
Like, and then they're just like, we hired an intern and it knows both. And I'm just like, is it like someone told them the secret? Like that's like unfair.
Eve, thank you so much for coming on the show. We will have links to your handles in the show notes so everyone can check it out. And thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
You're gonna get like a bunch of likes on your like Instagram, and they're gonna be like from me going through all your videos and like relating.
I'm gonna go through the backlog.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fork Around and Find Out. If you like this show, please consider sharing it with a friend, a coworker, a family member, or even an enemy. However we get the word out about this show helps it to become sustainable for the long term. If you want to sponsor this show, please go to FAFO.FM/sponsor and reach out to us there about what you're interested in sponsoring and how we can help. We hope your systems stay available and your pagers stay quiet. We'll see you again next time.